Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Altishyan, Director of Client Partnerships here at Pacific Cascade Legal. And today we have CPA and Certified Divorce Financial Analyst Ryan Finley to talk about creating a financial game plan when you're starting from ground zero in divorce. So, Ryan, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you doing? Thanks for having me,
I,
Steve.
I'm doing well. It's sunny. It's the middle of January, so in Oregon, that's a good thing.
It's a good day.
And so before we start though, Ryan, you want to talk to listeners a little bit about yourself and why you think this is really an important thing to know.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Now, my name is Ryan Finley. I'm the founder of Freedom Financial Services Group, and we specialize in divorce support, forensic accounting, divorce support, litigation support. And what that means is we typically we'll have a client come to us when they're first starting out going through a divorce. A little bit more about myself. Been uh, I've been a financial person for 35 years. I started off in public accounting and then worked for a company that bought and sold real estate. And I was in the new business development group of that company. So I did a lot of analyzing businesses in real estate and whether we should purchase them or not. So that gave me a good background as far as projections and income and expense budgets and the value of money and how things should be treated and looking forward and budgeting. So that, and then I was a CFO of some real estate companies, some construction companies, some development companies, a little bit of everything. And so that was kind of my background up until about 5 or 6 years ago, and then kind of had a life change and decided to help a friend from a financial perspective. She was a divorce coach and helping some clients and needed some financial information. And so I started helping them and really enjoyed helping people kind of what our discussion here today is people that are thrust into a financial situation and they're not financial people and they're complicated financial situations. And I came in to help them kind of understand their own financial situation, even though they've been married 20 years and they've got these different things. They weren't involved in the finances, so they don't know what they have and they don't know what they're going to have, and so or
Yeah.
what they need. And so that's kind of it's a fulfilling work for me because the appreciation that people get going from, they're deer in the headlights to having, a plan at the end of this.
Yeah. Yeah. And it to me it feels like that's what you're kind of talking about when you're saying starting, from ground zero. You get a lot of clients who just literally, they don't have the knowledge. They need to start learning.
And then you're exactly right. And so I'll give you a scenario that we see a lot. So we have, you have a young couple that man and woman, they get married, they meet, they get married, they both have careers. 5 years down the road, they decide to start a family. One spouse stays home with the family, one spouse career takes off. So, they're both as important as the other. It's, not one career is more important than the other. One may make more money, but one's raising the family, one's putting their values in there, one's taking care of everything. The 10 years down the road, they decide to get a divorce. This one person hasn't had any exposure to the finances. They don't know what they haven't been involved. And all of a sudden, the person they trusted the most is suing them for divorce, and so there's all the uncertainties there. It's an emotional situation. So what we try to do is come in and help this person. That's 80% of the time, that's our client is this person. And so they don't know where to start. So they come to us first and it's like, and we help them understand what they have. We start pulling together financial documents and putting together a marital balance sheet. And That's everything they own and everything they owe, and just what the leftover is. Um, Another thing is we show them, what they're so we go through their tax returns, we go through their pay stubs, and just say, here's the income that you have coming in. We look at your tax returns. This is what you've made over the last 4 or 5 years. So, and this is what you've spent. So I know this is a lot going on, and this person's not hasn't been dealing with the finances for 15 years. So we try to break that down into little segments and say, okay, on a monthly basis, here's the income that was coming into your household. Here's the expenses that you guys were using for food, for mortgage, for gasoline, automobiles, insurance, dental care, things like that. And so we do that different ways. One of the ways we do it is there's typically a lot of the families will have an account that we'll say it's the operating account of the family. So that's where the paychecks come in. That's where the food gets purchased. The credit cards get paid into that. So we'll take that and we'll upload, let's say, 2 years of those statements. And we'll go through and we'll say, okay, everything paid to Kroger is food. Everything paid to Walmart is home. Everything paid to Shell gas station is fuel. So we'll classify those expenses and put them into usually a 12 to 24 month spreadsheet and say, okay, over the last 24 months, here's what your budget has been for fuel. Here's what your budget's been for clothing. And it tells them, they may not know, they know, well, okay, so some things are obvious. My utility bill's been this, my mortgage is this, my insurance is this, but there's other expenses they may not be aware of. How much do we spend for dog food or for medical care, things like that?
Yep.
And so we show them, here's what you've spent. Here's what your the last 2 years of monthly expenses have been. And they kind of see that and they say, okay, that makes sense. And so that's the first step. As you said, they come in and they're starting at ground zero. No knowledge, no financial information. So we're spoon feeding them a little bit at a time and try to help them understand it. And we like I have a big monitor that we put all this stuff on, and I try to simplify it into a spreadsheet that shows them, here's the money coming in, here's our income, and then there may be 15 different categories. Here's the more, so they can see it. They see this spreadsheet, how they spend their money. And it kind of gives them a little peace of mind. Okay, I understand that. You know, and as the divorce process goes, then we start making the plan on what do I need to live on? How does how does all this information affect me?
Yeah.
You know, and one of the things, the hardest thing to overcome on this, Steve, is this is a very emotional time. And we're asking them to make financially logic decisions in an emotional time. So we try to get them, where it's not an emotional decision. It's like, well, I've got to have this, I got to have this. Well, the impact of that decision now is this later. So we kind of project out what that looks like. So I tell them, I said, okay, let's say this lady's name is Elizabeth. Elizabeth, we are now looking at the business of Elizabeth. You've got to take all your feelings, all your emotion, not all of them, but some of them, because you are making a business decision today that's good, that needs to affect how you live the next 5 years, the next 10 years. And so I know there's a lot of emotion on this, but we've got to try to remove that. Well, there's a time and a place for that. And I know it's hard to do, but that's why I like looking at spreadsheets, because spreadsheets don't have emotion to them. It's just facts. It's just, this is what's coming in, this is what's going out. And so we try to look at it that way, but we try to walk them through and through this financial situation just to kind of get them comfort and get their arms around it. And so that's kind of where we start, and kind of that's usually at the first part of the divorce.
It feels like that's where a lot of our clients, the most anxiety lies not yet thinking about what am I going to do when I'm retiring, but what am I going to do next month? Because I don't, can I afford to live here next month? I mean, it seems like you're kind of shoring up that short term,
Yes,
and so they can at least start to think about stuff going a little bit forward, and you know, and then you were talking about like the house, which it's really interesting because that is, we find, the most sentimental and non, hard financial decision that gets made. And and some of these they have to, like you said, they start after thinking about making fairly quickly because, who's gets the house, their kids and all of that stuff is involved. And they always say, well, no, I want the house. And that may just not be the best way to go.
you're right. And it may not be, but they're what a lot of them are trying to do, and you know this, is that they want to leave it as normal for the kids as possible. So
Yeah.
staying in the same neighborhood, staying in the same school, the same friends. If that's financially possible, that's a good thing to do. And if it's not, you don't sacrifice your future to make that happen. You don't spend 10 years worth of cash for 5 years worth of living. You
Right.
don't sell all your, because there's two components to this. There's uh, an allocation of assets, which just say we have houses and cars and investments. There's that part that you in a marriage you have to divide up. It's like, and there's certain things that's give and take. It's I'll take this car, you take your car, I'll take this investment, and you try to balance it out as best you can. Sometimes that if a house is involved, if a spouse wants to keep the house, they have to give up something else. And they could give up an investment or a CD or something that would be significant to them down the road. And, or in order to keep the house, they may have to liquidate a CD to make those house payments. So there's things we look at that. And then, of course, we factor in, you look at what if they work, they may not work, but if alimony is involved or child support, there's calculations that do that. I know in Tennessee, the child support calculation, it's just the state gives you, they have this formula and it's
Yep.
you make this, she makes that. There's the allocation of number of days that you have over, we'll say nights that this person gets and that person gets. And it's just a straight calculation on
It
child
is.
support. We have this
Yep.
many kids, they're this age, and this is how it works out. So that's a fixed number too. So you factor in that, you know, and then whether sometimes spousal support is justified and sometimes it's not. And so we go in and look at that. In a situation that I described, typically, if you have a working spouse and a non-working spouse, then there should be some type of spousal support there in most situations. But you have to factor that in. And if that's factored in, what does that look like? How much does what do my expenses look like, or what do her expenses look like post-divorce? So that's the other thing we start doing. When we start looking at the budget, what it is now, then what does my budget look like if I keep the house? What does my budget look like if I get an apartment? It's going to vary a little bit. There's certain situations that we haven't seen before. Some of the home mortgages are still 2.5 or 3%, and so in certain situations now, it makes more sense for somebody to keep the house than they do to rent a three-bedroom apartment because their house payment may be 2,500 to $3,000, to stay in that four-bedroom house, where a 3 or 4 bedroom apartment may be more than that. But those are situations you look at on an individual basis. I'm not saying that's right, but as the mortgage rates have gone up, anything purchased in the last 2 or 3 years, that's not. They wouldn't be able to stay in the house. It would be less expensive to stay in an apartment. So, you don't want someone to stay in a house and have to liquidate the assets we talked about that were being allocated earlier. Um, to be able to afford that. But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. Um, do you ever get clients who are you've kind of uh, revealed, shown them all their ways that they can make, a different decision or not, but their question isn't necessarily what, it's how do I do it? I don't even know how to set up, you know, a payment schedule or a bank payment. It just they can be very intimidating when you just you just think yourself dumb, but you're not because you just haven't done it.
You're right, and we find that in the situations I've described, we see that a lot where the one spouse has handled everything. They don't know how to do a bank draft. They don't know how to go online and check their account. Some people do, but it's we go through and we can help them with that. We charge by the hour, so we don't. It's when people come to us, we have an hourly rate. And that's good for most people because, they're not paying, we don't charge them a flat $10,000 or $8,000 or whatever. We track our time to the minute. When we have a software that we clock in when we start and we clock out. So they're paying for actual time. And this is time that we could do that as well. If they want us to sit down and explain how this works or what to do, how to check my accounts, how to transfer money, how to pay these bills, what does that mean? We'll be glad to do that to them. We don't help them invest money, but we can introduce them to people and we'll say, well, I think this person would be good for you, but
Yeah.
part of what we do when we look at the settlement, we advise, towards the end, if they go to mediation or they get a settlement statement, we help advise this is what's best for you. This is what this financial situation, we think this is a good offer because of this. We don't think this is a good offer because of this. So we kind of direct them a little bit from a financial perspective, but it's their decision ultimately. But we try to
Yeah.
explain in simple terms why we think that's better and why that's better for them long term.
Yeah. Yeah. I know one of the hardest things to have an agreement on can be retirement accounts. And because they've got so many different things working on them, depending on what kind of retirement accounts. And so they're tough. I mean, it's you need an expert, not necessarily, like you said, to tell them what to do, but to show them, well, if you do this, this is what that's going to mean, and down the road.
And I'm glad you brought that up because all things aren't the same there. They may look the same when they start
Yeah.
dividing assets. So let's say, for instance, that this marriage, this couple has $1 million in, we'll say, Microsoft stock. So typically you would say, okay, you get a 500,000 in this stock and I'll get a 500,000 and we'll just go our separate way. That sounds fair, doesn't it? But when you start looking at it, if I give you all the stock that I bought 20 years ago and my basis in it was $20, you're going to have a huge capital gains tax on that money. So your money isn't $500,000 anymore. It may be 300,000 because of the tax effect of it. And mine may be, 450 because I don't the stuff I've got has little appreciation because my basis is higher in it. So that's a great point you made because we divide things up or we recommend dividing things up on I'll say a lot basis. If we bought 10 shares in this lot, I get five, you get five. That way you have the same basis in all those
Yeah.
investments. So
I like that. That's a great idea. It sounds like you work with the attorneys a lot,
we do.
especially when you're talking about mediation and settlement. And have you just wondering how many instances you've come up with? Because I think it can happen where you got to teach the attorney
And
because
we've
they
done
want to
that
go
a
a
couple
different
of
direction.
Yeah, and we've done that a couple of times. Well, more than a couple of times. There's some things that are complicated. There's some things that vesting bonus plans. There's some times where, there's, and for your listeners, what a vesting bonus plan is, it may be something, let's say this year, I'm going to say 2025, even though we're in 2026, that I get a vested bonus plan this year. And so I'm going to invest in 3 years over this bonus plan. So I'm going to invest in 2025, 2026, and 2027. Let's say mid-year 2026, I get divorced. So there's a portion of the 2025 would be marital. Part of the 2026 would be marital, even though it hasn't been paid. It may not get paid till the following year,
Yep.
but we need to calculate that value of what that accrued bonus would be, or what the marital portion would be. So there's situations like that that I advise on. A lot of dissipation that I advise on. A lot of the attorneys will say, hey, you know, um, husband had this spouse, this girlfriend. We know he took these trips. He bought her gifts. Can you go through the stuff and find that? We can do that. That gets added back to the marital estate, and then that gets divided. A lot of other things. Uh, it gets real complicated around real estate, business valuations. There's a lot of things that attorneys are very good at law. Some of them are financially savvy, but most of them don't have the expertise that a CDFA or a CPA or a forensic accounting would have.
Yep.
We don't take business away from them. We supplement what they know and what we
Yeah.
help them. You
Yeah.
know, as I mentioned, I think I mentioned earlier that, there's a lot of attorneys that we deal with that just turn over the discovery to us and say, hey, you do this. It's mostly financial. You put all this together, you pull these together, and then tell me how what I need to know.
But
And that
yeah,
allows attorneys to handle more cases and do a better job of them because we give them a summary and we do all this work for them. They're still reviewing it before it goes to the other side, but it's a better use of their time.
the case as it goes through, and there's, like I said, there's a settlement. There could be all the way to a trial, but in any case, there'll be some sort of a judgment, and things will be distributed, and all the stuff you talked about will be kind of in the judgment. Have you ever had someone come to you with like that judgment and say, "What does this mean?" Is there like any sort of post-divorce help that you can give people who've come from a divorce and it says now, and even if you were working them, it's like now it's time to do something. Can you not necessarily give you, like you said, investment advice, but you can point me in directions now to where to go?
And we do that. And what we hope we've done for this client is explained all that prior to the judgment. But in some situations, there's so much going on through a divorce. It's just sometimes they just don't grasp it because
Yeah,
it's emotional, it's financial, and you've got kids involved. It's a storm. It's a divorce storm, and it's just hard to keep track of everything. But you're right. So we do make appointments with them after that. And it's like, and what that looks like is we'll just sit down and we'll go back over their budget again.
yeah,
Here's your expenses. We talked about this is what your new housing's going to look like. You're going to take some of this money, buy a condo. You're able to afford these payments. You know, where a lot of the education is on credit cards because some people get used to spending money on credit cards, and they've got to factor that in. Okay, credit card payment. We scheduled this amount for close. We're talking cash there. If you put that on credit card, that's an additional amount that you're going to have to pay that's really in this budget, but you're putting it in this budget. So, a lot of it is an education process with them post-divorce on where they need to kind of watch their spending a little bit, you
yeah.
know.
Yeah, I think you told me when we were talking before about what we are going to talk about was, you know, you you don't just tell them what to do and then they do it. You empower them in the future to be able to do it themselves.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Um, and one of the, like I said, from a perspective, I said this a little bit in my introduction. The thing that makes this so fulfilling to me is we get somebody at the start of this, at ground zero, and they come in and they have no idea. It's a panic. My best friend's suing me, the person I trusted most in life, you know, we're getting a divorce. So who do I trust now? And so they come in and it's a storm. And used to see them grasp this and slowly build confidence. And, we've explained what this looks like post-divorce. And then when the divorce comes and they understand better their financial situation and it's just peace of mind that they get and the confidence you see
Yeah.
them build over this process. It's like, hey, I don't need to be dependent upon that person anymore. I've grown as a person
Yep.
through this process that I know I can do this. Ryan's educated me on my financial situation. The attorneys have helped us guide this. I know I'm going to be okay with these. I've got this. This is my schedule for the kids. This is what I've got. And to see their confidence build through this process. And then when that divorce is final, they know now that they're going to be okay
Yeah.
at this. Where there was panic at the beginning, now there's confidence. The confidence is I'm going to be okay. My kids are going to be okay. I know I have a plan. We're going to live here. I've got the kids these days. This is my budget. Here's my assets and I'm going to be okay.
Yeah, and that seems like the most important thing. You've taken them from fear to confidence. Even if in the divorce they didn't get everything they wanted, or there was, they didn't, the, the disputes didn't all go away. There's still some, but you've made them confident that they can go forward when they were not confident they could go forward before. And that's got
Exactly.
to be a huge
Exactly.
part of what you do.
Exactly.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, well, this was really, really, really good advice. It's amazing how you can take incredibly complex concepts and make people understand them. And like I said, even people like me. So that's a big thing. So I'm thankful you came on, so much for being here today, just to talk about this, creating financial plan, when you're starting from scratch. And I really love what, as you said, turning them from being fearful to confident. And that just goes beyond other things too. Are confident in all kinds of I'll be okay, as
Yeah.
opposed to just, oh, on this investment, I'll be okay.
Right. Right.
I love it. Well, thank you for doing this today.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I've enjoyed my time.
Oh, I have too. Everyone, thank you also for joining us today. Anyone, of course, with further questions on today's topic can post it here, or we can get you connected with Ryan. And saying that, Ryan, could you tell people how they could get a hold of you?
Yes, the best way to reach me is my website, and it's www.freedomfsg.com. And it's Freedom Financial Services Group, which is freedomfsg.com. And there's a button on there that's for a free consultation. They can click on that button and fill it out, and then I'll turn around and get back in touch with them. If
Perfect.
they're old-fashioned like me, they can reach me on my phone number, 941-945-2846.
I love it. I love it. Great time. Thank you for being here today. And, for everyone else, until next